Four painting techniques that we're going to be exploring now are masking, or using a surface to protect other areas of the painting; stencil, using a similar technique, but being able to repeat that process; Saran wrap, a nice way to create subtle changes in textures that can be used for areas like fur or water by using a saran wrap layer and then moving it over top; and Sgraffito, a way of placing paint down and carving it away using toothpicks, the back of a paintbrush, or other surfaces to create small incised drawings. We're going to review how to produce all of these, and then I'm going to look for you to create a small painting, trying each four as ways to create textures and details in your work.
To utilize the masking technique, you really only need a few simple materials. You need some tape, a painting surface, and some paint, along with a brush. So what we're going to do is we're going to mask out just a simple shape, and masking means that we're going to tape the edges so that the paint only stays inside the border that we create. For this, I'm going to be taping a triangle on my blue background. When masking, it's good to work on a prepared surface, like a painted piece of paper or chipboard, or a canvas that has gesso on it. The reason why is the tape will be less sticky when it contacts the paint, rather than if you're putting this on paper where it can peel off and create texture. So if you're working on paperboard, always make sure to prime the background, even if it's just white. That way the tape will have a smoother surface to be removed from, and it won't be ripping up your paint. For this, I'm using some scraps of tape that I have. You can use fresh tape, or you can start with scraps. You just want to make sure that the back is mostly clean and that you remove anywhere where paper or other materials have ripped off. So when I go to mask, I'm going to outline my shape, and I want to make sure that I push down on the edges that are going to be coming in contact with paint, where paint's going to overlap the part that needs to be painted and the area that I want to protect. I'm checking all my tape, looks good. Coming through, and I'm laying it down to leave a negative shape or leave an empty window space of what I want. And the important thing that you want to do is make sure that you really smooth those edges down, that you don't have any buckles or creases that paint can slide under and ruin your mask. This is going to give you a nice crisp edge if done correctly. So I have my shape masked, and now all I need to do is add some paint. Yellow down. And you can paint over those edges, and as long as it's just going onto the tape, it'll create a smooth edge. Now, yellow tends to be pretty transparent, so I might want to paint a couple layers of this. So I'm going to let this layer dry, I'm going to paint another layer, and then I'll show you what it looks like whenever you remove the tape. So once your paint has dried, and you've gotten as many layers on there as you want, you can check it, make sure none's coming off on your fingers, and then remove your tape. One trick that I have for the tape is I always say you want to remove it at an angle. So you want there to be an angle between the two sides. So try to remove that, and you can alternate those angles, and you should reveal a crisp edge. And the nice thing about creating a masked area is that you can paint multiple layers of paint on there to get really solid color, and you can protect your background from it. So again, I'm using that angle, and just removing the tape to get those crisp, straight edges. And you can save this tape for other masked areas. It is reusable until the back gets all covered in paper or material. So masking tape can be reused, repainted over, and I'll probably use this for other parts of the demo. So that's masking. So for our next technique, we're going to create a stencil. And stencil is very similar to masking, except it can be reused. So where masking usually goes around one specific shape or area, stencil can be picked up, placed back down, and reused to create repetition. To create a stencil, you may want a variety of materials, and there are different approaches to this. One is using contact paper, clear shelf paper that you may find in any kitchen aisle. This is like a sticker. You can also use layers of blue tape, and how you cut that stencil can vary. You may use scissors or an X-Acto or utility knife. If you're using a cutting blade, make sure you have a surface under what you're cutting to protect it. In this case, I have a cutting board that's made for this, but a simple piece of scrap cardboard will also help. That will allow your blade to go completely through the surface that you're cutting without going onto your table. So to get started, I'm going to walk through how to set up a tape stencil and then talk about how to create a contact paper stencil. So to create a tape stencil, you may want to use some scraps of tape. Again, just making sure that there's not any extra stuff on the back, like scraps of paper or anything that you may have lifted up. What you want to do is make a series of overlapping rows. So I'm going to put down my first row of tape, and then I'm going to overlap a second row of tape, usually over top. I'm going to smooth that in. That overlapping is joining these together. And I'm going to repeat for the third. You can repeat this for as long or as far as you need it to extend. So now you have a sticker base. What you can do then is, if you have an X-Acto blade, cut a shape. Again, always cut away from yourself. So notice that I'm working away from my hand that is touching paper. So I've made a crescent shape. I'm going to just go back through and double check that my lines intersect. And the nice thing about using the masking tape is that it's a material that you have readily available. So what you're going to do is pick up at the top, and sometimes you may need to use your blade to get under there. Then once you have it, you're going to pull from the top down, and you're going to have a shape that you can reuse on your stencil. So I can pick that up and move it after every paint. You also have the negative space if you wanted to do a crescent shape painted rather than the area around it, so you can move that. You can also repeat this process with contact paper. If you don't have an X-Acto blade, you can use scissors. So we can either cut our teardrop shape or have our stencil on the background. For this demo, I'm going to use the contact paper just to show you how it works, but it can be substituted with the blue tape. Again, the blue tape can be removed to be reused to create a pattern. For the contact paper, it does have a backing, much like a sticker. So you're going to want to make sure that you fold it back, try to get a crease on it, and slowly work that clear paper away from the surface. Once you remove that, you can place it on your surface, and just like working with masking tape, you want to smooth around the edges. I'm going to do the same for this contact paper, and I want to make sure that I line these edges up whenever I go to place it down. That way it creates a nice continuous outline of that shape. Now I'm only going to paint these each once, but if you were doing an area in a painting, you may repeat the pattern. So I'm trying to peel that corner back, and sometimes creating a fold will help. And you will separate the backing from the adhesive surface. We'll place it down. I'm going to line my edges up there. Again, going around with my finger. Now, contact paper is not as sticky, so it's easily removable. That's one of the reasons why people like it. But you want to really make sure you push down and go around your edge. Once you're done with that, you can add in your paint and paint in the areas just like you would with a mask. So I'll paint in the inside on this, and for this one, paint around and remove that next. Anywhere where there is not contact paper, the paint will go. We're going to let this dry, and I'll show you about removing it. One thing I'm noticing about my stencils, I have a big puddle of paint there. You want to try to make it an even application. So I'm going to clean my brush out, let this dry, and then we'll look at what a stencil image looks like when you're done.
So now that the paint is dry, we're going to remove the stencil, and we're going to be able to reveal what we painted. Again, after you remove the stencil, you can repeat its use to create patterns and various elements again and again in your painting. If the paint is taking a while to dry, you can use a hairdryer on a low setting and go over each area of your painting slowly to help it move along.
I've just used a hairdryer to help speed up my process. I'm going to check real quick. My paint appears to be dry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and remove my stencil. Now I'm going to do this slowly so that I preserve the backing since I'll be reusing it. But you'll notice that anywhere where that stencil backing was, it kept the area that was painted original. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to get a fingernail under this. And I am going to remove my stencil and see that I have a negative space shape. Again, if you wanted to continue, you could replace these, smooth the edges, and repeat the process for multiple paintings. Using Saran wrap, or this clear cling adhesive that's often found in the grocery store, is a great way to create texture on your paintings and create subtle cracked and broken areas, good for that old painting effect or water. It's a really simple technique. It takes a little while to dry, but it will create a cool, subtle effect. So what we're going to do for Saran wrap is we actually start by painting onto the surface first. And you want to make sure that you're applying a good amount of paint. You don't want it to be a thin layer. So I'm just going to paint an area of red on my yellow background, nice and thick. When I'm done applying paint to the surface that I want to have the texture, I'm going to take a piece of Saran wrap. And you can find this in your kit. And I'm going to place it on top with a few wrinkles. Now the nice thing about Saran wrap is once you push it down, you can wrinkle it to create a random kind of pattern. And what's going to happen is that the areas where the Saran wrap is bunched together, it's going to pull that paint together to create little ridges. When you're done, you just need to be patient and sit. What you can do to control where the Saran wrap is you could mask or stencil around that area if you want crisp edges. When the Saran wrap is removed, you create a cool, crackled texture. Sgraffito is a fun way to draw into your paint. Sgraffito comes from early graffiti, which meant to scratch into a surface. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to lay down a layer of paint on a dark or light surface, and then we're going to scratch in to reveal the color through it. For this, I typically like to do a dark underpainting and then put a lighter color over top, but you can also do a lighter color as an underpainting and put a dark color over top. For this, I'm going to place red on top of black. I'm going to paint my area of red first and create a nice, solid area of paint. Now you are only going to be able to paint this area once because you want to complete the Sgraffito technique while it is still wet. So I've got my area painted, and then what I can do is go in with a toothpick and I can remove some paint by drawing on the surface. Toothpicks will work for this, but artists have typically also used other pointed surfaces. Even the back end of your brush will work for this as long as you clean it off. So experiment with putting paint down and removing that surface with another edge. Just make sure, once you are done using the back end of your paintbrush, that you also wipe it off.